It is Ray being brutal, but it is Ray who is on some level, I think he pulls his punches without meaning to pull his punches. That on some level he feels that this is enough. And even a Ray, even this great humanist and even this optimist was not someone who could find a silver lining. It almost doesn't feel like a Ray film. In these bits, it feels like kind of an early Mrinal film almost. Like this is even that super of it saying this many people die. But that's not what Ray would never do that. More than the famine, I think it holds up because of its relevance, because it's the idea of this opportunistic Brahmin, the idea of the Brahmin getting everything he's asking for. Soumitra's little wicked, Soumitra's doped up in the middle of the afternoon and giving people false medicine. It's all sacrilegious to the otherwise image of Soumitra.
Yeah. Hello everyone, welcome to Filmgopat. Although the year has drawn its end and we are in 2022, we were not able to discuss all of the Satyajit Ray movies last year. This speaks at two levels, one at the magnanimity of the man himself and the other at our tardiness. Hence, we will continue our discussion on Ray and his masterpieces at least through the early part of 2022. Today, we discuss Jalsaghar and Ashani Sanket. Jalsaghar released in 1958 and played a quintessential role in establishing Ray as a director of international repute, starring Bibhutibhushan in the lead as the decadent Zamindar towards the end of an era with the apparent rise of modern India, and how he puts his efforts to uphold his prestige while facing severe economic adversity. The other film, Ashani Sanket, released in 1973 and stars his regular collaborator, Ray's regular collaborator, Soumitra Chatterjee in the lead. The film tells the story of a village in Bengal during World War II and examines the effect of the Great Bengal Famine of 1943. Ashani Sanket went on to win the Golden Bear Award that year. And wow, what a treat it is to talk about these classics with one of our favorite film critics, Mr. Raja Sen. Raja has been a film critic for 15 years and writes a column on television for Mint Lounge as well as Formula One column for Rediff. And he has reviewed for Rediff, NDTV, Hindustan Times, the list goes on. Raja has also written dialogues for 99 and Go Goa God and written and directed part of the collaborative film X, Past is Present. Raja, such a pleasure to host you today at Filmgopat. Thank you so much for finding the time and talking to us.
No, thank you. I've been meaning to do this for a while, so thank you guys for being patient. I'm glad we are doing this, and I'm excited to talk about, these two films in particular, because Jalsaghar is my absolute favorite. Like, I think in that, it's always hard to pick a favorite Ray film. We all have those conversations, and it's always difficult. But for me, Jalsaghar really is, head and shoulders above the rest. I can stay on Jalsaghar for as long as I want, you guys want. But yeah, let's move on. Let's move on to this bleak, brutal Ray film. but bleak and brutal in a Ray way. Let's get to that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, please work on Raja, since you brought it up that it's bleak and brutal in a Ray way. Let's hear from you about that. Why do you say
it's that? Like, see it. It's such a the Bengal famine that he's dealing with there. There are parts of this film where you see the village girl selling herself, or you see the the murder, which possibly might be one of the most violent sequences most explicitly violent sequences in a Ray film. And so you're seeing that, and you see the end, and you see the super of how many people died and all of that. So it almost doesn't feel like a Ray film. Those parts of it, the murder does, because there is an artfulness to how he staged it there, where it is meant to claw at you. It is meant to strike you somewhat harder. So those facets of it are not very Ray-like. They do seem. This came. I mean, I think this came out. This is 1972. This came out 72, 73. So it came out. So at the same time as Calcutta 71 was coming out, right? Which is much more naked, much more. So in these bits, it feels like a kind of an early Mrinal film almost. Like this is even that super of it saying this many people die. But that's not what Ray would never do that. That's not
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
part of his thing.
Yes.
But
The
I think
newspaper cuttings and all.
yeah, exactly. But so then let's go back to what makes it the Ray film, which is, well, one, Soumitra, but also the characterization of Soumitra, even the casting of Soumitra. Now, see, the idea is when you start watching it, you're seeing this lovely couple. They're beautiful. And I think the casting of Babita, we never saw in anything else
Yeah.
before that. Bangladeshi actress coming in, and she was so warm and immediately likable on screen. And then to see that alongside Soumitra, who of course was Ray's ideal hero, his Ubermensch, and he was. But then here it was not Here we had Soumitra in a way that we had never seen him before,
Yeah.
right? We
Hmm.
had Soumitra the liar, Soumitra the
Hmm.
fraud, Soumitra the opportunist, and so then you realize it's one of those Ray's very canny casting choices that it's Ray and Soumitra, it's Soumitra, so you are expecting a certain charming character, which he is, a certain smooth talker, which he is, all those things, but yet the fact that he's a fraud, the fact that he is a character that you are not, you start out meaning to like him, just like the people of the village.
Yeah.
You are somebody who is taken in by his gloss, and then you suddenly realize he's a quack, giving someone false medicine, he's telling some false prayers, he's doing everything. He is basically just taking this Brahminical privilege and using it to kind of, impose this fiefdom on this
Hmm.
village, right? He's not a powerful man, but he is yet a Sanskrit speaking Brahmin, which
Hmm.
in that village, within that context, is enough to kind of exert this great superiority. And which he starts doing, right? He starts very early on. You see, he's drunk on power. He's literally, asking for those hookahs to be made, and that he won't
Hmm.
have anyone else's hookah. And everything is just this. He's throwing his weight around from the very beginning. So when you see a man come up to him and ask him for charity, and you see that he's giving the charity. So he's giving charity in a begrudging way that I can't give any more than this. But here, take this. But that should absolve me, because he knows. It's like he's taken stolen goods, right? He's stolen essentially from the people he's
Hmm.
owing. And
Yes.
he's giving a little bit of that away. And then when his wife is doing the same thing in a more hospitable way, when this man comes calling and she says, because he knows my husband, that is enough reason
Hmm.
for her to be hospitable and nice and feed him a couple of square meals and ask him to sleep and take rest and all those things. And he's not, he's that affects him. That he cannot take that level of generosity. That he says, we have made what we are making. So it is that kind of it is showing that idea of, you know, kind of cannibalizing each other's resources, which is what the whole film will turn into soon.
Hmm.
But it's showing that sense of like opportunism and everyone hungry for everyone and everyone trying to just grab what they can. When we see the earlier times when he goes to the shop and they say that some resources are running out, tail is running out or chal is running out and it will run out soon. Take some more now. What if we don't have it later? All those things when it's still harmless. And early on, it's almost played for laughs. When he's at the shop and they're having a conversation, I mean, Ray treats it so lightly. The gossip that's being had in the thing, or when they say, where is Singapore? It must be near Mednipur, and all of that,
Yes.
and that is there for the humor, but also to illustrate to us how much of a fraud Soumitra is, how much he knows really nothing. This is not the Oppu, this is not the Soumitra from Charulata. This is a guy who is really this is really like a man who is trading in his privilege for
Hmm.
power. And so when the film becomes darker and when the famine actually starts, then I feel that there is a uh, drastic change in tone, which makes it a hard film to watch. I mean, Ashani Sanket is not a film I would, one, recommend to many people or watch many times myself. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can see the merit of it, the artistic merit of it. And again, but what happens in the second half that the, second half is a very Hindi film-esque way to put it. I apologize, but but what happens after the drought really begins, and the savagery of it, and while it is handled in this, it what's remarkable about it is how quickly things escalate. You know, how you are hearing about it one day, you are hearing that things are going to get bad, you're hearing that, and suddenly the desperation is already there. Suddenly there are fights outside and riots outside, and people not knowing what to do, and people crying out for food, and so all of that. So I think that is there. I think that it's not, I would not classify it as, I think there is a certain jarringness that happens to the consistency there. I don't think it is completely, for a filmmaker who is, if you look at most of his other acclaimed films, uh, who is so obsessed with tonality. I think that
True.
now the fact that he's hitting a jarring note is also, I'm sure it is intentional. That it's meant to jar you. It is meant to bring in the audiences who were not expecting an indictment or an accusation or I mean, this idea of hunger and poverty was close to Ray. Of course, we go back, right back to the first film, right back to the idea of the grains of rice and harvesting. These are all important themes in Ray's work. So I think even where at some point in the mid 60s, he was not a very political filmmaker or a political activist kind of an intellectual, but if I'm correct, I think in the 60s, about when the food protests had happened and the food protesters had been jailed, he had protested against that. He had walked on the streets of Calcutta. That the iconically tall man had walked for those people. So I think that idea of starvation, that penury, that poverty. Now the counter view on Ashani Sanket has always been that it's not. Is it as brutal as it should be? Like, should it be even more brutal, even more
Mm.
harrowing? Should it be the Mrinal film that in places it looks like it's trying to be?
Mm.
And that, I think, it's an important question, because it doesn't go that far. It leaves
Mm.
you shaken, but it doesn't. It's not a nightmare. So I think it's those things, that it is Ray being brutal, but it is Ray who is on some level, I think he pulls his punches without meaning to pull his punches. That on some level he feels that this is enough, that even maybe even the jarring tone is enough. And again, who's to say? Like, we're talking about the saturation of this film. Again, it was one of his, rare color efforts. I mean, I don't think he had made too many in color before this. Kanchenjunga, of course, but then I think maybe just one more in between. And so this here the colors seem all wrong. When you're looking at it, and I think that's something to be wondered about. Like, if we would have seen the blood of the film in the sort of color that it was meant to be seen in, perhaps the impact would have been great. I mean, of course, the film has won awards, and it has an audience, and it has all of this. I think the relevance of it is extreme today. I think that's the truly important thing, is more than the craft, because I think we can find better crafted Ray films,
Yeah, of course.
or better written Ray films. But I think that the importance of this, the idea of this Brahminical privilege, it is sadly all too relevant today. That sort of the classism and the bigotry that it's showing, that it is there. And again, it's that thing, the people, Arup, like you were mentioning about the servant in Jalsaghar, who was happy, only too happy, and ecstatic. Similarly, these people who are lower than him on the food chain, lower than Soumitra, who are looking up to him, are only too happy to be able to serve him. The guy who
Yeah.
is running, going out of his way to get the hookah, saying, I have a new one that no one has used, that I will bring for you, is ecstatic to be able to do him this favor, to be able to ingratiate himself to him, because they are thinking that that idea of man and superior man is so deeply and disturbingly ingrained into the consciousness that it's there. So when he is trying to tell people, even when people are trying to correct him and saying, did you do it this way? Did you do this part? Or did you, he said, okay, find a tree that faces this certain direction, and that he can't find that tree. And then he says, okay, do it here, it's fine. And then they're like, are you sure it's fine? So even the people who can question him, they would rather believe that they are wrong than actually question him. So that's the scary thing about the film. The famine is just to show on some level that the impulses in the village of the opportunism, the rich getting more, the feeding frenzy, the shortage is just exacerbating all of that. So it's almost showing that even without the famine, things are horrible. With the famine, things become dreadful, and there is, the village girl track is one of the most disturbing tracks, no, in all of Ray. That idea of because you don't see it happen in that. It's almost Bimal Roy kind of a track. It's almost a melodramatic. It could be in a Do Biga Zameen kind of a track, right? That idea of this girl who is having to, who is otherwise cheery, who's doing all these beautiful things in the first, and then suddenly she becomes this person who goes on such hard times that she is forced to prostitute herself. So it's very dark in this way that somehow, I don't know, like I suspect that it's not. I don't think he had, it's. I mean, it should not be anybody's comfort zone. So I'm not saying that, but I feel like it doesn't seem to be as cohesively
Organic, probably. Yeah.
yeah, like as cohesively. I don't think he's having as much fun making this film. Honestly, like you can sense it, that there are bits that he's not lingering on. Even the murder, even the blood spilled, you know, is something that could have perhaps been more horrific, or more like could have been more emphatic in a way that's harder to forget. But I think
Get you.
he completely. I think he does pull his punches a little bit. I mean, I'm not saying it's not a it's not a powerful film. It is a powerful film, and you watch it now. I mean, I watched it. I watched it recently. I watched it a couple of months ago again after a long time, and it was a again on Amazon, and it's not a good quality print and all of those things. So I think all that plays into it, but you know it's not Ray. It's that it's the batsman leaving out the cover drive. You know what I'm saying? It's that idea of you're watching it and you're seeing craft and you're seeing a certain nakedness, and I think he wanted to shock audiences. He wanted to have them been hit with something unsuspecting, but I don't think it's entirely his. It's not his. It doesn't stand out for me within his oeuvre in that sense.
No, absolutely. I mean, we also feel the same, and we wanted to ask you this, that this famine kind of comes as a backdrop, but it's more about a character study than a political film or talking about, what happened in the famine time.
Hmm. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like we were discussing, that it is about the fact that even without the famine, there is already this. They're already starved of knowledge, of information. They're all ignorant. Just that even that Singapore Mednipur line shows how far removed they are from the world around them. And there is gossip and there is rumor, but they don't really know anything. And so when you're seeing something like that, I feel like as a character study also, though it doesn't go into the true depth of either Soumitra's character, because you are, as in with opposed to, for example, Jalsaghar, or any of the great Ray character studies like Nayo, or wherein you are studying one particular character, but here Soumitra is kind of two things, right? One, you start off like the villagers impressed by Soumitra, and then as soon as you start as a viewer getting hooked onto whatever you understand that what Soumitra is selling them is snake oil, it's not real. As soon as you become privy to that, then Soumitra is becoming the audience surrogate, because
Yes,
then
yes, you are
Soumitra is
so right.
becoming the viewer in the whole scheme of things. So it doesn't
Yes.
work in that character study way that other Ray films, do. It's not contemplative. It's more spectatorial.
Mm.
So, and as a
Uh,
spectator, it doesn't provide something new. It is just a sense that this is. I mean, I guess that's also the point, that even a Ray, even this great humanist and even this optimist was not someone who could find a silver lining in this sort of a situation. Even he was forced to give up and see that this is this is a this is a. I mean, I think it's hard also for Bengalis to talk about the famine. It's a, it is just, I mean, the perspective on the famine is harsh.
yeah,
It's not
Yeah.
something that can be put,
yeah, yeah.
and especially because of the history books, because of the way the British have coached us, because of the way the British coached Bengal, who was very all too glad to be coached by the British. So all of those reasons, they starved us, and then they fattened us with ideas of how good Churchill was. So it's that dichotomy also makes it hard for the educated civilized Bengali of that era to talk about the famine, really.
Yes. Right,
So
right.
I think it brings up questions, but I think more than anything else, more than the famine now, as you said, Arup, more than the famine, I think it holds up because of its relevance, because it's the idea of this opportunistic Brahmin. The idea of the Brahmin being getting everything he's asking for. And but when I watched it again now, I couldn't help feeling that if the second part of the film, if even with the drought on, if the film had maintained a sort of satirical tone, if it had
Mm.
maintained a satirical tone, it might have been a richer film, because I mean, the sadness of the famine doesn't, it's not surprising us anymore, and he is using melodramatic narrative touches, even though of course he's not revealing them in melodramatic ways, or he's not being cliched in the telling, but he is using melodramatic brushstrokes. So
Mm.
instead of that, if those horrible things would be happening, but yet there would be a sort of satirical tone, which of course he perfected later, which is more politically satirical films, that you realize that this is, that might have had a greater impact. That might have had a slightly, it's just that then we would have thought more about the Brahmin. And I think what this does is, because it goes into the famine and the brutality of the famine without ever quite pivoting back to the opportunism of the Brahmin, it lets the Brahmin off the hook. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Like
You are right.
so
You are right. Yes.
that is a bit of the, that is where you feel that you can imagine
Yeah.
a drunken Mr. Ghatak walking out of this film.
Yeah, that's true. And in fact, as you I have a couple of follow-ups. First is, as you talked about later what Ray did in the more political and
Yeah.
trilogy films which he made, especially about the tonality of it. So I was wondering, would you consider like something like a Jono or no is actually able to express that angst in a much better way than the angriness or the problems which Ray sees in the way he treats the subject. Even I think if you compare the girl selling herself in Ashani Sanket, and then again the sister, their friend sister there again,
Yeah.
in
John, I
that
don't know.
situation, John Orlando. So you can see, I think the tonality and the anger is much better channelized than probably in
Yeah.
Ashani Sanket.
I think what happens in Jono Orno is Jono Orno is kind of rusty. Ray. It's almost like the Never Say Never Again of Ray. It's not, it should not be an official Ray film. It's not the craft isn't there. It's there in bits and pieces,
Mhm.
but like even Agontuk, which has craft, which has where the storytelling is sharper. I think in Jonah Arunno is a little bit of, maybe he wasn't well when it was being made, all of those factors, but it is not a filmmaker at the height of his powers. So you're not seeing the craft of it. What he's trying to say on a script level, on a music level, and again, given the pandemic, the relevance of John Arunno and misinformation. So all that is there. It's there, absolutely. But as a craftsman, when you are revisiting John Arunno after all these years, you are not, as a film student, you are not going to be like awestruck by John Arunno. You're going to be like, it's an interesting curio because of how it shows what that man was thinking or what he's trying to say. But the artistry of Ray in John Arunno is a little missing. It's not, it's not him it's not going to make the best of list ever. So, but you're right about the thematics, that he is trying to address those themes, perhaps because he thought that he hadn't addressed them well enough the first time around, perhaps because he thought that he needs to be more tonally straightforward. So John Arunno, that's again, and that's the amazing thing, right? We're talking about two Ray films which are not his best films, and yet which are frighteningly relevant today. Both those films, like John Arunno, again, is a film that, Indian filmmakers today can learn a lot from what that film is trying to say. I think one of the, big problems in our cinema is that there is, with some exceptions, but at least with Hindi cinema, is that there is very few, very few Hindi films. There's even the great ones who are, have a lot of style and a lot of craft, a lot of, visual imagery, are essentially not being able to say too much. And when you're seeing these films and you're seeing the power of directness and the power of unambiguity and the fact that, he could say so. Then of course we come to when I was speaking about political films, you come to Hero Raja, you come to Allegory, and you see that, how can you, it's as direct as it can get, right? There is no second thought about who he's referring to make Hero Raja Deshe during the emergency. Like it's insane. Many years ago, I had interviewed Soumitra, the great Soumitra. He had come to Bombay to do King Lear, and I interviewed him and I had asked him, and I had said, what? I said, when you were doing this film during the emergency, or doing this Indira flight film. So he said that, it's just the fact that by then, even governments were a little scared of Shruti. So it was that idea that no one else would have dared to do it, but he also dared to do it because he knew no one else would dare to really stop him. So there was that. But yeah, really, those films again, like Hero Raja, again, a film that really deserves restoration. Again, these are because those are films that every Bengali knows, can recite, can has the songs memorized, but has not traveled well because of the lack of great subtitling, the lack of restoration, the lack of proper academic discourse on those films. These are not simple films at all.
Also, Chondo thing in Hero Raja Deshe is very difficult to actually capture in an English subtitle. Yeah. That also plays a
absolutely. But I think it's like we haven't. See, I think it's only now when you are seeing the subtitling, thanks to a Netflix or an Amazon, with these regional films, with the Malayalam films especially, where the subtitling is really good. When you see it, they're getting the idiom right. So if sometimes they'll use an American phrase just to convey a meaning of something, in a Malayalam film. So I think that is very interesting to see, and I feel like that when we do that we start doing that with Bangla cinema. Because I agree that it's hard to translate rhyming text, but it's not impossible. We've translated, all the great poets have been translated into English. We have read Pushkin in English. I've never read Russian. But the point is that it can be done. And it's something important for the future generations to see what he's done there, because it's astonishing. Like, I wrote about Hero Raja Deshe again last year. I wrote about it in conjunction with the Bengal elections. And I spoke about how it's about the idea that everyone on set was scared of the tiger, and so
Hmm.
even on a even on a film like that, where so and so is the villain and everything, and then one has to fear a Bengal tiger, and then I ended my piece by saying, or a Bengal tigress. But at that point, in the ebullience and enthusiasm of what may happen, and all of that. But but the film holds up so brilliantly. The politics of it is so strong. The idea of the importance of education is so great, and that's what you understand that why, like, it was so important for Ray to cast Soumitra in Ashani Sanket,
Hmm.
that he should be that person that people are already going into the theater with that indulgence. That this is Soumitra. We are going to see Ray's hero. This is going to be that partnership, and then to kind of betray our confidence in that way, to like play a fast one and say that no, but this is not Soumitra. This is not Soumitra's little wicked. Soumitra's doped up in the middle of the afternoon and giving people false medicine. It's all sacrilegious to the otherwise image of Soumitra.
Yeah, yeah,
Right,
And
so
right,
and
right.
and
so
who
true.
is the face of nobility for Ray. He's the great
Yeah.
he's the great
But
figure. Yeah,
tell
sorry.
me, Rajada,
Hmm.
I mean, we all discussed that, we might not put Ashani Sanket among his best, and we
Right.
absolutely agree. But what happens is he wins the Silver Bear with Charulata or
Hmm.
Mohanagor.
Hmm.
Pather Panchali, of course, gets a special mention in Khan.
Hmm.
But he wins the Golden Bear with Ashani Sanket.
Hmm.
So it kind of, the highest recognition in terms of if I go by that kind of a categorization. So
Right.
what is it that the West was so fond of when they watched Ashani Sanket?
Literally in a
Uh,
word.
yeah. No, but I think that I mean, see, his films traveled really well, and they had right from Cannes onward, right from Pather Panchali onward. I think uh, there is that sense of, perhaps with Ashwini Sanket, it could be white guilt to a degree. It could be that
Hmm.
idea of, see, you are also seeing when we look at for want of a better comparison, when we look at the only awards we study now, for whatever reason, are the Oscars, right? We keep going on about it, and we write think pieces about it and all of that, about these very populist American awards. But the fact is that the Oscar, they are, and we talk about how there are certain kinds of films that the Oscars prefer,
Yeah.
and they become Oscar bait, that there will be Holocaust films, or there will be
Hmm.
biopics, or there will be sad films, and all of that. The fact that very few comedies have ever won Best Picture. All of that. The idea of human suffering, that idea
Hmm.
of showing the downtrodden. So all of those things. So there is a reason that plays well with the jury. And I think with Ray, Oshani Shankit might have come at a time when there are so many factors when it comes to awards and prizes and this and that. I mean, how a certain film touches a jury. How I don't think we can be empirical about that, but I do
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
that it is a hard hitting film. I feel like we are looking at it with hindsight, and while placing the great filmmaker on an even higher pedestal than he would have ever wanted to be placed on. We've considered him the be all end all, you know uh, the universe of cinema and all of that. So I think the problem is that our expectations are unreal given his other cinema. So I think
Yeah.
I think when people are just looking at this film in its isolation, even if it's not checking all our boxes as admirers or consistent viewers of his work, or people who are consuming his work in hindsight, it might have had a different effect on new audiences, on audiences
Hmm.
there, on audiences for whom sometimes what happens is when you see some French films and French shows which are very popular in America or in the UK, but are not popular or not loved in France because they don't seem authentic to them. So I think it could be part of that. Though I
Right.
do think that if anyone were to talk about, I mean, if we go into essays, if we go into the importance of his work, I think maybe it was important for him also as a filmmaker to take a stand.
Mm.
with these films, with genre. See the fact also that we are talking about craft because we are geeky about film, and we are thinking about where the camera was placed and how long he must have waited to do the shot and how improvised his dialogue must have been and how this actor has said this and what the brilliance of the scene is, and we're looking at the craft of it. But sometimes what the film is saying might be more important than what the craft is, and which is why,
Yeah.
again, to say that the relevance of Ashani Sanket is completely unquestionable. The relevance of a genre, no, is, I mean, it's scary how relevant those films are today. They should not be this relevant, but we have looped in such a way that
No, even a Pratidwandi, if you talk about a Pratidwandi,
yeah, no, but Pratidwandi on the other hand is like it's stunning craft.
yes,
It's
yes, of course.
he's doing his whole French New Wave. He's going wild with the jump cuts.
Yeah.
I mean, Pratidwandi is like a. I mean, I wish there were like interviews of his, like like that's the point. That's when you wish that there were great interviews of him being conducted while he was making that film, because you want to get into his head, right? To see how much energy suddenly, because you see that when you compare a Pratidwandi to even you know other more propulsive Ray films, they seem sometimes sleepy by comparison, because you're suddenly seeing this energetic filmmaker who's doing all these.
Mhm.
I mean, that is Ray suddenly saying, "Okay, I can do radical. You want to see radical? Let me do radical," and it's remarkable. So of course, but politically, Pratidwandi is a phenomenal film. I mean, it just to that opening interview scene, the fact that they're discussing Vietnam, he wants to discuss Vietnam. They're thinking the moon landing is what's important. I mean, it's absolutely
Rajata, although
sensational.
I'm digressing a little bit here,
Yeah,
but we
yeah.
had a discussion with Jyothiman sir on
Ah,
Pratidwandi on our
right.
channel, and one of the
Ah,
high points of my life is that I asked him, "Do you like flowers?" And he
yeah.
replied, not unconditionally." That is.
No, no, I applaud and appreciate that. No, but no, it's very important. It's very important. See, it's so rare to get these opportunities to interact with these giants who have colored our imagination and our perception in these ways. It's really quite. It's one of those your pinch yourself moments. Even when like
Yeah. Yeah.
when we were talking, I remember Soumitra had told me that he said that he really wanted to play Goopy,
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
and that was one of the things that he had requested, and he said I had fought with him, and I said, please amake kottuda. And he had said that he had finally told him that "Tumhe chasha manabe na." And Romit was like begrudging when he says it. Even now, when he was saying it, he was like, I understand that no one could have done it like Tope, and he was fantastic in it. And it was just such a good. He's like, but it's just when you read a part like that as an actor, you are hungry. You just want to play it, and then you are in your head. You start thinking, no, what if? All those little moments of because Soumitra is also the infallible, the great, the absolute giant, especially in Ray's work. So you wonder what could have been over there as well. But all those great performers, right? I mean, when you are seeing even a Jalsaghar, just to go back to that excitable servant, like when you see that moment when he's doing that jumping like a monkey and in glee towards the other one, almost mocking him, but being funny, that moment is almost a Robbie Ghosh moment, right? It's
Yeah.
almost that
Yeah.
level of and you have those, right? That universe is interconnected on some fantastic level. Anyway,
Last question about Ashani Sanket is, and we mentioned about Pratidwandi. This idea and this recurring thing of migration that
hmm,
happens at the end of Ashani Sanket. In the
hmm,
first film, in Pathir Pachali, it ends with that. They're
hmm,
migrating from the village to the
hmm,
city.
hmm,
Even in Pratidwandi, it's opposite, from the city to the village. So
hmm,
this migration keeps on happening as a recurring theme. So what do you think
right.
about that?
I mean, rootlessness is for filmmakers. It's always as a storytelling device. It's always been a very powerful and device for all filmmakers. If you look at Godard, for example, and how much he would play with the idea of the Parisian outsider and the insiders. So I think the fact that there were such clearly delineated worlds, even when you look at, and you don't even have to look at migration for that. You can look, for Ray, when you're looking at a Mahanagar, you're looking at uh, different parts of the city, which may as well be different cities.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
so you have a lot of that. So that idea of displacement and rootlessness is very important to give a character part of the character's great quest. Like what is this character, like rootlessness or search for meaning or search for career or this. So the idea of that, when you are trying to bring it all together, and you see it in the films of Benegal, for example, also.
Mhm.
Right from Ankur
Yeah.
onwards, you're seeing that there is that sense of where do I belong and my place in the world, and which is a question when the protagonist asks themselves, so does the audience. That idea of identity based on what the identity is. So when in Jalsaghar we're looking at the identity being rooted in wealth and privilege and societal status. Similarly in these ones it is like, where are we now and where do we have to go? And is a physical journey going to somehow help in our overall spiritual understanding or our metaphysical understanding of ourselves? So I don't think that is a very necessarily like, I think it's one of the many themes that Ray explores, but I think that those are universal storytelling themes that
Mhm.
all great novelists will keep returning to, that idea of where do we belong, or what is giving us the most joy, or where is meaning. And you can find that sort of a sense of self questioning within his protagonists throughout all great filmmakers or great novelists or great artists, because it's an idea of introspection that is making their characters contemplative.
I think we have discussed Ray at a length with you, and thank you so much, Rajada, for that. I mean, this
No, no, I'm
one
glad
took
to have,
time,
and
but it was such an enriching one.
no, I really enjoyed it. Thank you guys for waiting on this, and I enjoyed talking about these films. And it's also always fun to speak with people who are so enthused and hungry to discuss, and that's great fun. So